in the amount of steps that Israel takes, unprecedented in the history of armed conflict, and military commanders
that's just a load of bullshit. I'm sorry, it just is.
Which other army?
It just is. Which other war in recent times have you had half the population is under 18?
All right, guys, welcome back to another debate breakdown. This is Piers Morgan in a debate with Natasha Hausdorff, an international lawyer who spends a lot of time defending the Israeli government's actions in Gaza. And I want you to really listen to how this conversation unfolds, because what makes this uncomfortable isn't shouting or emotion or anyone losing their temper. It's the way questions are handled. There are moments where Piers asks something very direct, not loaded, not dramatic, just direct. And instead of an answer, the conversation slides sideways. You'll hear legal language, you'll hear arguments about intent, you'll hear why certain questions are supposedly unfair or irrelevant or based on misinformation. Just keep one thing in mind as you watch. When the questions get simpler, the answers get longer. Let's roll it.
Yeah. Natasha, I mean, look, if I was an Israeli, a regular Israeli, I would be pretty concerned that people like me have come to the place we've come to in this debate. You know, I've been harangued by pro-Palestinians for a long time for being too supportive of Israel's right to defend itself. Harangued, abused, mocked, threatened, all of the things that come with that in a war. But I just felt I couldn't do anything else but speak out. When you launch a 3-month blockade against a people already suffering in the way that these Palestinians have been suffering, and I'm not talking about Hamas, I'm talking about the innocent civilians in Gaza. It's a population of 2 million, with half of them under 18. More than 20,000 children have been killed, even if the UK ambassador has no idea what that number is, but knows exactly how many Hamas terrorists have been killed, oddly. I would just be concerned, if I was an average Israeli, that people that supported us after the horrors of October the 7th are now beginning to go against, certainly in my case, the Israeli government, not the people of Israel, not Jewish people. They will always have my support. But this Israeli government is out of control. We saw and heard from the words of Smotrich last week, the finance minister, a very clear mission statement to clear out all the Palestinians from Gaza. That is a form of genocide, whatever. You're a lawyer, you'll probably tell me it doesn't meet the exact legal criteria of the word genocide. But if you're clearing out an entire people based on their ethnicity from where they live, that to me, and most people around the world who don't have a horse in this race, is a form of genocide. What do you say to that?
Well, Piers, I'm particularly glad of the opportunity to come on, not before time, and address so much of this misinformation, which seems to be at the core, not just of your shift, but what is a marked shift in the public discussion of this topic. And it is, of course, because of the abuse, the haranguing, the mockery, and the threats and the intimidation that so many people are falling into the easy line.
Well, that's not why I've changed my mind.
Well,
I don't give a damn about who threatens me or how they threaten me or how they mock and abuse me. Listen, I was getting all that long before this war, so I get it on pretty much any debate I ever had. That's fine. I'm a big boy. So please don't misconstrue anything that I have done in terms of a pivot in the way I view this with anything to do with being threatened into it, bullied into it, or cajoled into it, because that would be ridiculous.
Because you've been clear that this is because of the change in the narrative around this. And I hope I'll have the opportunity, and you'll allow me the opportunity to address some of this false information. And there is a great deal of it. It starts with this notion that Israel imposed an entire blockade on aid, which is being put forward without the context of the fact that in the hostage release deal, which preceded it immediately, there were over 25,000 trucks of aid that were facilitated into the Gaza Strip by Israel. The estimates that I have seen is that that should have been a stockpile of between 5 to 6 months of food and humanitarian assistance. Some estimates are in the region of 8 months. Where did that aid go? That is the question I would expect reasonable people without an agenda here to be asking. Where did that aid go if all of these claims of starvation are to be taken seriously? The reality here is that there is no Israeli-imposed starvation on the Gaza Strip, that there has been facilitated over the course of this war.
But that is simply not true. I'm sorry.
Well,
no, hang on. When Israel and when the Israeli government, let me phrase that correctly, when the Israeli government ordered 3 months ago a blockade of food and aid going into Gaza.
Yes.
That is a deliberate state-sponsored form of starving a populace.
No, it is not, because it was
That's exactly
done...
what happened. That's why they look like they're starving. That's why they're risking death.
Piers, you've asked me
to
on
get
here.
to scrabbling bits of food.
Forgive me. You've asked me on here to answer these questions. And
I can challenge you.
And I just explained that blockade, which was imposed in order to prevent Hamas continuing to fuel its war machine by selling additional aid, that it was diverting, and we'll come on to the way that diversion is going to be prevented in the future, I hope. But the fact of the matter is that this blockade was instituted in the context of there being 5 to 6 months, maybe even 8 months of aid that was facilitated into the Gaza Strip. And throughout, if you'll allow me to finish this point, throughout the war, the volume of aid that Israel has facilitated into Gaza, and this is not being reported by the international media, but it is available, publicly available information published by COGAT, over 1,700,000 tons of aid which has been facilitated into the Gaza Strip, which is more than required for the civilian population. The study that was conducted...
Why are they so hungry then?
The study that was conducted...
Hang on, why are they so hungry?
May I finish this point and I'll come on to answer your question?
Why are they so hungry?
Well,
Why are they stampeding over each other, risking death to get at scraps of food? I don't understand. If they're all so well-nourished and Israel's behaved so impeccably properly in terms of supplying enough food for months on end, why do they all look like they're starving to death and are prepared to risk actually dying?
All right, pause it here, because
food?
this is where the argument gets turned upside down.
It's what I'm seeing
She's
with my
saying
own eyes.
there was
Which is
no
Hamas
starvation
propaganda,
because
which you
aid
must
went in
accept
before
is
No,
the
it's actually
blockade.
footage.
That's
I'm
the
watching
defense.
news
But
footage
that only
of
works
thousands
if
of
you ignore
people
one
fighting
basic
with each
reality.
other to
Gaza
get at
is
food.
sealed. People can't leave. Israel controls what goes in: food, fuel, aid, and when. So a 3-month blockade isn't an accident. It's not a misunderstanding. It's a decision. And here's the key point everyone keeps dodging. You don't need to intend starvation for starvation to be the result. If you cut food off to a trapped civilian population, you don't get to wash your hands of what happens next. And notice how the logic shifts. Instead of answering, why cut aid at all, we get, there were stockpiles. Where did the aid go? Hamas diverted it. Even if every single one of those claims were true, every single one, that still doesn't justify cutting off the rest. Because Hamas doesn't starve first, civilians do, children do. That's why Piers keeps coming back to the same image: people risking death for food. You don't see that in a population that's fine. You see that when people are desperate. And when that reality becomes impossible to deny, the argument changes again. Suddenly, it's, that footage is propaganda. You're being misled. You can't trust what you're seeing. But hunger isn't propaganda. Stampedes for food aren't propaganda. Bodies aren't propaganda. You can debate law all day. You can debate intent all day. But if you cut food to a sealed population for months, the outcome is starvation, whether you like the word or not. Alright, let's keep going.
I don't need reminding of what happened that day. That is why I defended Israel's right to defend itself so staunchly. But I cannot defend what is happening now. What is happening now is militarily inexplicable to most people I've spoken to in the military. I have a lot in my family. Nobody understands what Israel's goal is here, other than flattening Gaza and kicking off. Well, hang on. As Smodrich has said, it is to take over and clear out Gaza of all the Palestinians. That is genocide, isn't it? Unless, I mean, you're a lawyer, you tell me.
Israel's war aims have been clear from the outset, which is the destruction of Hamas.
They haven't done that.
And the return of the hostages. Well, because the war's not over yet.
You haven't done either of those things. All you're doing is killing more and more civilians, and you've been starving them.
Well, but who's you? Forgive me. I'm here as a lawyer.
The Israeli government, and you're here to defend it, right?
No, I'm here to defend the rule of law and the weaponization of international law, which has been consistent throughout this process. The propaganda that we're discussing right now, which is clearly what has shifted your position and perspective on this,
what do you mean by propaganda?
Deeply dangerous. Calling Israel a committer of genocide or saying that it is starving children.
Well, actually, the people alleging that Israel's committing war crimes are two former Israeli prime ministers.
Who have their own political agendas here, let's be
well,
clear.
how convenient that two former prime ministers of the country have said that you are committing, as a government, not you, but the government is committing war crimes, and you dismiss it as just a bit of internal politics.
Well, no, it's a very serious matter that the misinformation that I would like to be able to come on to address is now also being propagated by two very sore individuals, Prime Minister Olmert, because he also served a prison sentence, and has had his entire proposed peace framework, that of essentially creating a Palestinian state in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, turned upside down by the realisation, and he hasn't had, unfortunately, the temerity after the 7th of October to recognise the risk that he would have put Israel to in light of the Hamas takeover.
And when you see, as we saw, and when you see, Natasha,
I was answering the previous question.
Okay, but let me just on the point.
Productive.
On the point of legality, actually, it's very productive. On the point of legality. Only last week, the Israeli government announced new settlements, 22 settlements.
Well, no, can we pause?
Well, hang on.
Yes.
On the West Bank, 22 settlements, which the international community views as illegal. They announced 22 new settlements. As a lawyer, given your adherence to the point of law, presumably you would condemn that.
Well, this is exactly why we need to be clear about how international law applies and why the notion of these so-called illegal settlements is a misnomer.
You don't think they are?
It's not a legal term, it's a political term, and it is part and parcel of a misapplication of international law to the status of the territory. These blood libels, occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism,
so you think the settlements are not illegal?
And genocide are all part and parcel of the propaganda, which I would like to be able to come on to, because all of the evidence goes in completely the opposite direction. In terms of Israel's compliance with the laws of armed conflict and its in the amount of steps that Israel takes, unprecedented in the history of armed conflict, and military commanders
that's just a load of bullshit. I'm sorry, it just is.
Which other army?
It just is. Which other war in recent times have you had half the population is under 18 and you killed 20,000 kids in 20 months?
Those figures are Hamas figures that you are constantly
give me an example of where this morality has been played out elsewhere.
Well, I was explaining earlier that the Hamas figures are inflated, that there are internal inconsistencies.
How convenient for you. You don't know what the figures are, so how do you know?
Because there have been independent studies.
How do you know how many figures are inflated or otherwise? You don't know how many have been killed.
Because we know Hamas lies. It is an internationally prescribed terrorist organisation.
Well, some might think you're lying because you say on one hand, I don't know how many children have been killed, but on the other hand, and that's a blood libel if you say we've killed any of them, but on the other hand...
That's not what I said, no.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know all about the ratios and you know how humane the Israeli forces are being, but you don't know how many they're killing.
Because even on Hamas figures, which we know to be false, which do not make distinctions between civilians and
false.
We do, because there
How do you know they're false? You don't know how many have been killed.
Because Hamas has even itself revised those figures down and acknowledged that they are false. And the UN is still touting.
So how many children has Israel killed?
If we go back to the question...
Can you answer my question?
If you go back to the ratio...
Do you know
but I can tell you the ratio, even on the basis of Hamas figures.
You can tell me the ratio without... But how do you know if you don't know how many have died?
I can tell you the ratio even on the basis of the false Hamas figures.
You've no idea how many have been killed, but you can tell me the ratio.
I can tell you the ratio.
You're a smart lawyer. Do you not understand how ridiculous that sounds?
If
we were in a courtroom now, you would be demolished by a fellow lawyer. They would say, what are you talking about?
Piers, this is not how courtroom etiquette is conducted, I'm afraid. I would be permitted
Actually, some of my favourite lawyers conduct them exactly like this.
I would be permitted to finish a sentence. The reason we can say that the ratio before the ceasefire was 1 to 1 or 1.15 to 1 is on the basis even of Hamas figures.
Well, 1 to 1 or 5 to 1? Which one was it?
1 to 1 to 1.5 to 1. At different points in that period, those were the two separate estimates.
Okay, pause it here, because this is where the whole argument falls apart. What she's saying is basically this. Israel only counts the people it intended to kill, Hamas, and everything else doesn't get counted. Think about that for a second. If that logic holds, then any army on earth can do whatever it wants as long as it claims intent. You don't count civilians, you don't count children, you don't measure harm. You just say, that's not who we were aiming at. And that's exactly why this conversation keeps going in circles. Piers isn't asking why Israel fights Hamas. He's not disputing October 7th. He's not even accusing Israel of deliberately targeting children. He's asking something much simpler. How do you claim moral superiority, legal compliance, and the cleanest war in history if you don't even track who is being killed? And notice what happens every time that question comes up. We get legal jargon, ratios that can't be verified, claims of precision, and then no data. You cannot claim a civilian to combatant ratio if you don't count civilians. That's not propaganda, that's basic arithmetic. And this is why the debate keeps snapping back to the same point, because no amount of legal language fixes that contradiction.